I didn't plan on stopping at the small corner coffee shop that morning. I only turned in because my hands wouldn't stop shaking, and I needed something, anything, that felt normal. The bell above the door made that soft, tired sound, like it was exhaling for me. It smelled like warm bread and old books. The kind of place where nobody rushes, and nobody asks what's wrong unless you ask them to. She was behind the counter. I'd seen her a few times before, mid-40s, hair tied back loosely, a faint smudge of flour always somewhere near her wrist. She wasn't beautiful, in the way people say in movies. She was better than that, she looked real. A little tired, a little amused at the world, like she'd already learned most of its tricks. When she saw me, she gave a small nod. Back again? Her voice was soft, steady. I shrugged, rubbing my thumb against the edge of a crumpled lottery ticket in my pocket. Yeah, I guess. She didn't rush me. She never does. She leaned slightly on the counter, watching me with that quietly attentive way she has, as if she's trying to hear the thing you aren't saying. Same order? She asked. I hesitated, just a second, but enough for her to notice. Yeah. Same. While she turned to make it, I found myself folding a napkin into smaller and smaller squares, an old habit from years ago, something I did when I needed to keep my hands busy. I don't think anyone ever noticed it before. She did. You okay? She asked without turning around, like she could hear something in the silence. Yeah, I lied. She didn't call me out on it. She just kept making the coffee, but I saw her glance at me in the reflection of the glass case, quick, concerned, then gone. When she came back, she slid my cup toward me. She always remembers to leave the lid off. You don't like it closed, she said once. You like to watch the steam. I still don't know how she noticed that. Thanks, I murmured. She smiled, the kind that barely lifts the corners of the mouth but somehow stays with you longer than the warmest hug. You look like you didn't sleep. I didn't, I admitted. Too much on my mind. Anything good? She asked. I exhaled a laugh, thin, brief. Not sure yet. Her eyes softened with that mix of curiosity and restraint. She never pried. She just opened small doors and let me choose whether to walk through or not. And most days I didn't. But today, there was something about the way the morning light hit her face, or the way her hands rested on the counter, steady, warm, that made me want to speak. I didn't, though. Instead, I watched the steam rise from the cup. The room felt too quiet, like the silence itself was listening in. She wiped her hands on her apron. Well, whatever it is, I hope it turns into something good. Her fingertips brushed the counter near mine, accidental or deliberate, I couldn't tell. My eyes flicked to her hand, then away, too quickly. She noticed. She always does. I nodded, trying to smile. Yeah. Me too. I took my coffee to a corner table and pulled out my phone. The screen lit up with the last message I never sent to my wife last night. Can we talk when you get home? I'd typed it, hovered, deleted it, typed it again. It still sat there, unsent, like a ghost of something that had already ended. As I stared at it, another message blinked in. From her. The woman behind the counter. Just one line. If you need company today, I'll be around. I looked up. She was watching me, only for a second, before she turned away, pretending to rearrange the pastries. And somehow, that tiny, unfinished moment felt bigger than anything waiting for me outside. Bigger than the news I was about to receive. Bigger than the lottery ticket burning a hole in my pocket. I didn't mean to go back that afternoon. I told myself it was just to clear my head, to sit somewhere that didn't echo with old arguments or reminders of what I'd been losing long before I realized it. But when I pushed open the coffee shop door, she glanced up like she'd been expecting me. You came back, she said, quiet but not surprised. Didn't feel like being home. She nodded, wiping down a table even though it was already clean. She always found something to do with her hands, like she was keeping her thoughts from spilling out. Want tea this time? She asked. You look like someone who needs tea. I huffed a soft laugh. That obvious? She shrugged lightly. Just a guess. She made it herself, no rush, no theatrics. Just warm movements, familiar, practiced. When she set the cup in front of me, she didn't walk away. She sat across from me instead, carefully smoothing her apron over her lap. I close early today, she said. Inventory. Or that's the excuse I gave myself. She kept her eyes on the tea between us, not on me. I waited for her to say more. You know, she finally said, I used to come here after dropping my son at college. This place felt less empty than the house. I blinked. She rarely talked about herself. How long ago was that? I asked. 5 years. Feels like a week. Or a decade. A small shrug. Depends on the day. I found myself staring at her hands, steady, graceful, a faint scar near the knuckle. I didn't know you had a son. She smiled without looking up. Most customers don't ask. And I don't offer. I understood that more than she knew. We sat in a comfortable, too long pause. She sipped her tea, and the silence felt strangely safe, like neither of us had to pretend. You ever feel like you're living next to your own life? I blurted. The words weren't planned. They just slipped. She exhaled through her nose, almost a laugh. Every day for the last 10 years. Her answer hit me harder than I expected. I wanted to ask why. I didn't. Instead, I noticed the way her eyes softened, not the usual warmth, but something closer to recognition. Like she knew exactly what I meant. What happened? She asked. With your wife? She said it gently, without judgment. I stared at the tea, watching a ripple settle. She left last night. Or maybe she left months ago. Last night was just the first time I saw it. She didn't gasp or react, just folded her hands and listened. Really listened. That's a lot, she murmured. I'm sorry. I nodded, and for a moment I imagined what she looked like when she wasn't holding herself together for customers. When she wasn't being polite and composed. When she was just a woman sitting across from someone who needed something he didn't know how to ask for. It made my chest tighten in a way I didn't have a name for. Something shifted then, small, nearly invisible. She reached for the teapot to refill my cup, and her fingers brushed mine. Just a touch. Barely there. But it lingered. And I knew she felt it too because she didn't pull away right away. She just breathed in, slow, steadying. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. I'd tell myself later. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. For the next 2 days, I kept finding reasons to be near the coffee shop. Not inside, just close enough that I could walk in if I wanted to. But I didn't. And she didn't text again. On the third morning, I finally pushed the door open. My chest tightened when I saw her, hair pinned a little differently, sleeves rolled higher than usual, like she'd been working harder than she needed to. She looked up. And something flickered in her eyes, relief, then restraint. She masked it quickly. You're early, she said, voice light but careful. Couldn't sleep. Again? She moved toward the counter but didn't step too close this time. You should try tea before bed. I nodded, though neither of us cared about tea. There was a silence between us that felt heavier than the last time. She wiped an already clean spot on the counter. You disappeared for a bit, she said softly. You didn't text? I countered before I could stop myself. Her hand stilled. She blinked once, slow. I didn't know if I should. Those words landed like a pebble in water, small, but the ripples kept spreading. Before I could answer, the bell above the door chimed again. A man stepped in, mid-20s, familiar confidence in the way he walked. He glanced between us, and something smug settled onto his face. Hey, Mrs. Q, he said. You're early today. Her posture shifted, almost defensive. Oh, hi, Rami. Needed to prep dough. He leaned against the counter like he belonged there. You're not at the shop, man, he said to me. Everything cool? I nodded, unsure of who he was to her or why his presence made the air feel suddenly colder. She didn't look at me. Not once while he lingered. She kept her gaze fixed on the espresso machine, shoulders tight. "See you around," Rami said, tapping the counter before leaving. The bell chimed again. Silence. She exhaled slowly, like she'd been holding her breath. "He's just a regular," she said without me asking. "Didn't say anything. You didn't have to." Her voice was softer than the words themselves. Tired. Guarded. I stepped closer. "Did I make things complicated for you?" She didn't answer immediately. She wiped her hands on her apron, then folded them, then unfolded them again, restless. "You're young," she said finally. "You're going through something big. And I don't want to be someone you lean on just because there's space." I swallowed hard. "That's not—" The words stuck in my throat. She met my gaze then, really met it. "I don't know what you want," she whispered. "And I'm not sure you do either." Her eyes held so much fear, curiosity, something warmer she kept pushing down. "I know I feel something when I'm around you," I said, voice low. Her breath hitched. Barely noticeable, but I caught it. "Don't," she murmured. "Not here." But she didn't step back. Instead, she moved around the counter, closer, pretending to straighten a stack of menus. When she reached past me, her shoulder brushed mine, soft, deliberate, impossible to misinterpret. I froze. She did too. For a second, the world narrowed to the quiet sound of her breathing and the faint scent of flour on her skin. She turned her head, just slightly, until we were close enough to feel each other's breath. Close enough to, she closed her eyes. I did too. But then she stepped away, fast, almost stumbling with the choice. "We shouldn't," she whispered, voice trembling for the first time. But the look she gave me said we almost did. It happened on a Thursday evening, the kind of evening that looked harmless, soft sky, half-quiet streets, everything the same except for the way I kept replaying her stepping away from me. She'd closed the shop early. I saw her switching off the lights through the window, her movements slow, distracted. I hesitated at the door, wondering if I should leave her alone. She looked up and saw me anyway. Before I could speak, she unlocked the door and stepped outside, pulling her sweater tighter around her shoulders. "You walk?" she asked. It wasn't an invitation. More like a truce. We fell into step on the sidewalk, side by side, not touching. The silence stretched, not awkward, just heavy, like both of us were afraid to break it the wrong way. A few minutes in, she said, "You haven't been to work." "I will," I said. "You don't have to explain," she murmured. "Not to me." But something in her voice said she wanted me to. I watched her hands as she walked, fingers brushing the strap of her bag, thumb flicking the edge of a loose thread. A nervous tick. It made my chest ache. "Who was he?" I asked finally. She stiffened. "Rami?" "Yeah. A kid who thinks he knows more than he does," she said. "That's all." But she didn't look at me when she said it. I swallowed, feeling something sharp twist inside me, jealousy, stupid and too young for my age. "You acted like I owed him something?" she finished. "I don't. I just don't need people talking." There it was, the fear she hid under all her quiet composure. "Talking about us?" I asked. She stopped walking. The street was empty. Only the hum of distant traffic filled the air. "About me," she said softly. "A woman my age, people like to assume things. And what would they assume?" Her breath faltered, one tiny, breakable sound. "That I want something I shouldn't." The words slipped out of her before she could take them back. She pressed her lips together, eyes darting away as if she'd let too much escape. I stepped closer. Slowly. "You don't," I said. "Not if you don't want to." She gave a quiet, shaky laugh, the kind someone gives when they're cornered by their own honesty. "You think this is funny?" she whispered. "No. I think this is real." She looked up then, searching my face the way someone looks for proof they're not imagining things. "You're 20-something," she said. "You're hurting. And I." Her voice cracked before she steadied it. "I don't want to be some soft place you fall because everything else around you collapsed." "You're not," I said. "You're the first place that feels." I stopped. The word was too big. Too revealing. She heard the unfinished thought anyway. Her eyes softened, then hardened, then softened again, like she couldn't decide which version of herself to be with me. "I'm scared," she admitted quietly. "Does that help?" "No," I whispered. "But it makes sense." We stood there, too close, both pretending to look anywhere but at each other's mouths. Her hand brushed mine, not a mistake this time. A choice. And then she asked, voice barely a breath, "What are we doing?" The question hung between us, trembling, waiting. The next morning, I went to the coffee shop early, earlier than the staff normally arrived. The lights were still off. Chairs still stacked. A faint smell of yesterday's bread drifting through the cracks in the door. She wasn't there. At first, it didn't bother me. Maybe she was running late. Maybe she overslept. But as the minutes stretched, something thin and sour worked its way into my chest. I checked my phone out of habit. No message. Nothing from last night either. I walked around the block twice, pretending I wasn't waiting for her. When I returned, the closed sign was still hanging. No movement inside. No clatter of trays or soft humming she sometimes did when she thought no one could hear. I almost texted her, fingers hovering over the screen. "Everything okay?" Typed. Then deleted. I told myself not to make something out of nothing. Not to read into one morning. But the silence, it felt deliberate. Or familiar. Like someone quietly backing away. I didn't want to admit how much that idea stung. By noon, I gave up and walked home. My apartment felt like a hotel room left mid-stay, half lived in, half abandoned. On the counter, the lottery ticket still sat where I left it, the bold numbers staring back like they were mocking me. I should have checked it. I didn't. Instead, I tried not to think about her. It didn't work. She didn't open the next day either. But this time, a handwritten note was tapped to the door. "Closed for a few days. Family. Family." The word hit differently. I read it 3 or 4 times, looking for some small clue, a rushed stroke of the pen, a personal hint, anything. Nothing. Just a single word that raised a dozen questions I had no right to ask. That evening, I ran into Rami outside the bakery. He was carrying a box of supplies, grinning like he always did. "She tell you?" he asked. "Tell me what?" He tilted his head. "About her son coming home? Short trip, I think. She only closes for him." Something inside me dropped. Her son. Her son who was only a few years younger than me. Her son who she never mentioned beyond one quiet memory. I stared at the pavement, feeling stupid for how close we stood just days ago. How close she let me. "Everything okay, man?" he asked. "Yeah," I lied. He walked off, but his words stuck to me like damp air. I went home feeling, not heartbroken. Not angry. Just paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. I sat at my kitchen table that night, phone glowing in my hand. I typed, "When you're back, let me know." I stopped. Stared. Deleted every word. If she wanted distance, she'd earned the right. If she wanted to pretend nothing happened, I'd give her that too. Around midnight I tried again, just her name this time. Still unsent. Still sitting in the drafts. A message that felt too heavy to send and too real to erase. She came back on a Tuesday. Not with an announcement. Not with a text. The shop lights were simply on again, the warm glow spilling onto the sidewalk like nothing had happened. But something had. I stood outside the door longer than I should have, watching her move behind the counter. She looked tired, hair loose, sleeves pushed up, a softness to her shoulders that wasn't there before. Or maybe I just hadn't noticed it until I missed it. When she finally saw me standing there, she hesitated. Not long, just enough to let me know she'd felt my absence too. She unlocked the door without saying anything. "You're open," I said. "Yeah." Her voice was steady, but her eyes weren't. "Come in. If you want." I stepped inside, and the bell above the door sounded sharper than usual. She didn't go behind the counter. She stayed near the doorway, wiping her hands on a towel that was already clean. "My son left this morning," she murmured. "Early flight. Did you have a good visit?" She nodded, though it looked more like a reflex than an answer. "It made me think about some things." I swallowed. "About us?" Her breath caught, a tiny inhale she tried to hide. "About lines," she said quietly. "And what happens when you cross them? Or almost do." There it was, the thing she'd been holding. The thing I'd been afraid to ask. I stepped closer, but not too close. She glanced at the movement, then at the floor, then at my hands, like she was mapping the safest place to land. "You disappeared," I said. She winced. "I know. You didn't have to." "I did," she whispered. "I needed space. And I needed to remember that I'm not 25 anymore. That's not a crime." "No," she murmured. "But it complicates things. You're young. You're hurting. And I." She exhaled, eyes glistening with something restrained. I felt myself wanting something I wasn't supposed to. Silence thickened, warm and painful. I moved closer, slow enough for her to stop me. She didn't. "You don't know me anything," I said. "Not a promise. Not a future. Just honesty." She looked up, finally meeting my eyes. "Honesty is the part that scares me." I waited. She folded her arms, then unfolded them. She reached for a sugar packet, then set it down untouched. "I liked having you here," she said, voice trembling. "More than I should have. More than I expected to." "Me too. And when you looked at me like..." She stopped. It felt real. And that made it dangerous. I nodded slowly. "Everything real is dangerous." She let out a small, almost broken laugh. "You're too young to say things like that." "Maybe," I said. "But it doesn't make it less true." A quiet stretched between us, not avoidance this time, but recognition. I reached for her hand. I didn't take it, just let my fingers rest near hers on the counter. Close enough for her to decide. She stared at the space between us like it was a cliff. Then, she moved her hand. Not onto mine, just close enough that our fingers touched lightly. Barely there. A soft, human connection. "I don't know where this goes," she whispered. "I don't need to know," I replied. "I just need you to say if it's okay to stay." She looked at our hands, that small, fragile point of contact, and nodded once. Slow. Certain. "Okay," she said. Time did what it always does. It moved forward, quietly, steadily, without asking for permission. But this time, they moved with it. Mornings were different now. Not dramatic, not transformed into poetic perfection, just softer. The kind of softness that settles into a home when two people have finally stopped running from themselves. Some days, Kyouko still woke up before the sun, sitting at the edge of her bed with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She still drank the same simple tea, still glanced at the clock at 8:47 a.m., a time that used to weigh heavy with memory. Except now, when she looked at it, it didn't hurt. It just reminded her of where she had been, and how far she'd come. Yutaka still drank his black coffee, still forgot where he left his keys, still frowned when he was deep in thought. But now, there was one thing he never forgot, to check if she'd eaten. To knock lightly on her door. To sit beside her on the balcony even when he was busy, just so she wouldn't have to sit alone. They didn't talk about big things every day. Real life didn't work that way. But slowly, almost invisibly, their routines intertwined, like vines learning how to grow around each other without forcing the shape. Some evenings, after long workdays and scattered thoughts, they found themselves walking to their bench. The same old wooden bench that had once carried all the weight they refused to say aloud. Now, it held something gentler. On one of those evenings, the sky was washed in a pink-gray haze. Kyouko sat with her hands tucked into her sleeves, leaning just slightly toward him, not enough for anyone else to notice, but enough for him to feel. "You still come here," Yutaka said quietly. "You still follow," she replied, eyes softening. Their smiles weren't perfect. They didn't need to be. She rested her head lightly on his shoulder. Not a dramatic confession, not a cinematic moment. Just two people choosing each other again, and again, without saying the words. And that was enough. Later that night, as they walked back home, she paused in front of the apartment gate. "What?" Yutaka asked. Kyouko glanced at him, a tiny smile curling at the corner of her mouth. "It's 8:47 again," she said. He looked at his watch. She was right. A small, warm silence settled between them. The kind of silence that only exists when two people have lived through something hard and come out on the other side, bruised, maybe, but together. "Good," he said softly. "Then we're right on time." And for the first time, 8:47 didn't mark a memory. It marked a beginning. A quiet one. An earned one. One only they would understand.